Good evening and welcome to tonight's show from DJ and TV, Disc Jockey News TV. Tonight's show is brought to you by Electra Voice, DJ Event Planner, DJ Trivia, Odyssey Innovative Designs and Cases, NLFX Professional, Promo Only, and the DJ and TV Insiders.
Welcome to DJ and TV and Tuesday Night with Ben Stowe. Now introducing the one and only Ben Stowe.
Yeah, baby. Yeah.
So we should be live, just like that. Sorry, that was like no countdown whatsoever.
All good.
Hey, we made it. We made it. Hey, welcome to tonight's show here on DJ and TV. For those of you who were trying to catch the last show, we had a fiber transformer modem-y thing about a half mile from the office that something happened to it. I think it was just too many people on it, so they decided to boot some of those people off. So, the power. I'm drunk with power right now. I'm sorry. It's just internet power. So tonight on Tuesday Night with Ben Stowe, not only do we have Ben Stowe, who's going to share education and knowledge in such a way that will make your head spin, we have Mike Doucet from Electra Voice. Good evening, gentlemen.
Hello.
Hey, John. How are you?
I am running way behind. My camera's really bad, so I'm going to unplug it. So, gentlemen, talk amongst yourself for a second.
Well, there's a segue for us.
Yeah, right. Yeah, just put you and together. What could possibly go wrong, right?
I think lots of things. Yeah.
There
Hopefully, we can have John reboot and save us pretty quickly here.
Here's the hoping, right? So
tonight's topic, we're going to dig into some audio issues. If you've got some audio issues, whether it's anything to do with sound, these men have got answers. May not be right, but they will have an answer.
Absolutely.
And that's what we like. So I've got a few questions already.
Isn't it like a game show like that where each person takes a position? So like Mike, you could go one way and I could go the other way, and
and we make the best. You guys can make the best.
Well, I think most audio topics are that way. Yeah, we can play devil's advocate with anything we want to do here, no doubt.
Well, and some of the questions that I had found and a couple of them that I put together will possibly show some of that, because as Ben says, that it just depends.
That's right.
For those of you wondering, yes, we got it in already. So I've got a few questions here. Again, if you have any questions you would like to have the guys kind of hammer through, just put those into the chat, whether it's on Facebook or on YouTube. We are broadcasting out to, I believe, 7 different spots. I think that everything is working. So I'm going to just share the link out to you guys out on Facebook, and we will jump into tonight. So the first question area that I want to talk about, guys, I want to pull this up, is this one will be a little bit, maybe not an easier one, but we're going to kind of start at the bottom of the list and work our way up. So somebody who had asked about running with our active or powered speakers, is there a maximum distance you could run with your mic cable, the XLR cable, from your board to your powered speakers?
Well, it depends, right?
Yeah, it depends. There is a maximum, but that number is not a hard and fast number. It's going to depend really on 2 things, and one, most critically, the quality of the cable itself. That's going to be a biggie, and then 2, the output strength of the mixer or whatever. They're not all created equal, but really more so the cable. A good quality cable, 800 feet. You can go a long ways on good quality cable. On a balanced signal, that's very important. On a balanced signal, unbalanced, 10 feet.
Can be a problem. So, Mike, the inputs on a variety of different speakers, because we've got from the ZLX all the way to the ETX. is there a difference in the, I don't know if I'm going to use the proper term, but the input, the pickup on the speaker that where the signal's coming in? Is there a difference in the sensitivity from one end to the other?
The input sensitivity can vary a little bit. I think generally speaking, though, they're fairly even. I mean, what we strive to really achieve is unity, right? So you're achieving a certain voltage coming in, and at that point, that equals the same from speaker to speaker. I think people get freaked out by that a little bit, in what you're really seeing a lot of times. When you're seeing limit lights and things like that, could be a variety of different things, and those vary a little bit as far as the protection package in each of the different speaker lines. ETX, for example, I know there's plenty of people that say, oh, ETX limits too early.
Right. Yeah. For that.
That is partially true in that it indicates limit earlier than maybe they would expect. But it's not necessarily limiting early. If you look at some of the competition, we look at even specifically the 18-inch, ETX subwoofer. You compare that to similarly priced powered 18-inch subwoofers, and we've measured some of them that don't indicate limiting until they're maybe 12 or 13 dB into distortion. Where we tend to be very right. And will it work? Sure. Will it make noise? Yeah. Will it perceive as louder? Yes.
Is it musical? No.
Right. but I mean, even you could even argue that with subwoofers, do you hear that distortion? Maybe yes, maybe no. So again, can you push that beyond that? Yes. But the point is
try that with a touring act sometime. Believe me, they hear
yeah, it. Right. I mean, limiting is really a function of saying, hey, this is where I should be. I shouldn't be more than this. Can you get away with giving me a little bit more? Yeah, but you are putting your speaker at risk at that point. I think as far as how you deal with that depends on what speaker we were talking about. Again, ETX is designed to indicate limit a little bit earlier because it's actually got some protection circuitry in it. That's actually really what it's saying is, hey, my protection circuitry is starting to work. Where others may have nothing at all, and by the time you see limit, you're really in danger because you're so deep into it at that point.
So, Mike, we've got our voltage coming in from our board. And then where it comes in, and then we have some device inside that's going to take that voltage and amplify it into what's coming into the cone itself. Where does that limiter? Where is it fitting into this process? Is it after, or is it detecting that voltage?
Well, there's two different ways you can limit a speaker, right? Both on the input or the output stage, right? The input is the signal coming in. If you're sending it too much signal, you're in danger of basically clipping the signal and sending distorted signal further down the chain in order to be amplified, right? So you're just making a distorted signal louder, which then can cause mechanical failures or thermal failures with the speaker if it's trying to do too much, right? If you're looking at the output stage, that's where if your input level signal is clean and good, and you're asking too much of the loudspeaker and the amplifier within the loudspeaker, that's where you're running into the output limit. So that's why it's important. In many of our speakers, you'll actually see an input and output, an input metering, and then an overall output warning, if that makes sense.
Okay, so it's kind of measuring both sides or gauging both sides of the before and after the amplifier.
Right. You want to make sure that neither one is blinking at you, I guess, at the end of the day.
And there are different types of limiters too. I think that's important to note, and that's probably a rabbit hole we don't want to jump down. I just want to point out that just to say you have a limiter, in Mike's case, it's saying that the speaker has a limiter and the limiter is engaging, as opposed to you are at the limit. And so that, you can use that word in different ways, but even if a device has a limiter, there are different types of limiters. So it's very difficult to take a broad brush and paint everything with it, you know.
And it's all about the voltage coming into the speaker. If it's happy voltage,
it is. It's really, well, it's all, I would say the two critical things, and Mike just said it, I'm just sort of recapping, but I would say the two critical things are voltage and heat, you know, and the number one killer of loudspeakers is heat. So, I mean, it's, you know, overwhelmingly, that's going to be an issue before mechanical failure, like he said. So anyway, we've beleaguered the point. So
excellent.
Good question, though. I mean, I think there's always an ongoing question with that, and it becomes more and more difficult. You know, signal flow and gain structure is always, I think, at the top of the list of people's misunderstandings or need for a little bit of assistance with.
And one of our favorite shows is when we do the how much voltage loss is going on when Ben pulls out his little meters and we start running wires.
Right.
It's always a fun 800. We can go farther. Okay, so this is something somebody put on one of the Facebook groups there, and they were asking about repairing of active speakers. Is there anything in today's active speakers, powered speakers, that are end user repairable, or is it just something to stay completely away from?
I think when you're talking about, you know, repair, you know, I guess if it's in warranty, there'd be no reason for you to do it yourself. So I assume we're talking about an out of warranty type of situation. At that point, I guess, are there things that can be serviced? Yes, depending on the part. You know, we generally only will sell certain parts to authorized repair centers, not to end users, only because so much can go wrong if you're doing it incorrectly. I think some of the parts are replaceable in the field by users. I don't really know what the list of those are, but generally speaking, it's cosmetic or fairly simple.
I would say a driver, you know, if you're
some of the drivers, but yeah, electronics probably not, but you know, I think we could sell you a whole woofer if you wanted to replace the entire woofer, you know, but even sometimes you got to be careful with that, and you got to be sure you know what's causing that issue. You know, you may be getting distortion coming from your high frequency driver, and you know, your natural assumption was it's a blown high frequency driver, but it could be something wrong with the amplifier that's making that noise amplify or something like that. So you know, at the end of the day, to me, by the time you buy the part, the trouble and the hassle, we strongly recommend just doing it through an authorized service center or through our own factory service.
And we did a show where we took an amplifier apart, and in that amplifier, which is a standalone amplifier, there were capacitors, and we talked about the danger of having that. Do the active speakers have a similar capacitor situation where that could be a potential danger for anyone taking it apart?
Well, sure, because they have amplifiers. So, you know, there's always that risk when you have components that are storing voltage. If that capacitor is energized and it discharges into you, it's going to be unpleasant. You know, I mean, yeah, we can all. I told a story where I got lit up good by a strobe light. So it doesn't take a very big cap to be unpleasant. I don't want to comment on the lethality of the caps in there, you know, because it would be there's a lot of, you know, variation there. But I think the best to just take a blanket statement here and say, be careful around capacitors.
And yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of like my favorite quote from Tommy Boy. You know, you can get a good look at a steak by sticking your head up a cow's ass, but when you take the butcher's word for it, right? I mean, there's experts that do this. Let them do that.
I don't think we've ever quoted Tommy Boy before, which we could.
I'll have to step up my Tommy Boy game.
Yeah, exactly. I'm feeling bad now.
Let's go.
I'm a big Farley fan too. Let's jump here. What makes a speaker a long throw or a short throw speaker? I hear DJs using those terminologies an awful lot. Mike, the new Evolve have a radiator system or a radiator type app. A device on them, I guess. I don't know what you'd refer to.
I think the word you're looking for is waveform.
Waveform. There we go.
Yeah, Waveguide.
Waveguide. Okay. So I mean, do things like that do it? What makes the difference between a long, short throw cabinet?
Well, there's a couple of different things we're talking about. We're talking about waveguides. I think first there needs to be a little bit of understanding as far as maybe what a waveguide is versus what a horn would be, a constant directivity horn, which Vanna will demonstrate for you there, which actually is, okay, well, there's a waveguide. We got a waveguide. So basically what that is doing is two things. That's actually taking multiple devices and summing them together. Hold that up again, Ben, if you would.
You want me to get the other one so you can see the point?
Yeah, sure. What you see is, inside of what kind of looks like a horn, but what's actually happening is the high frequencies are traveling down different unique paths. Okay, and those are actually those wavelengths. They're different types of squiggles there, which actually takes the sound and travels down the path and turning it into basically a planar wave, right? So it's coming out as a fully summed and time aligned audio.
Okay.
Essentially. So, it's basically taking a single source and breaking it up and then summing it back into a different type of wave that comes out, which achieves, some various benefits depending on how you're using it. So you look at that versus a constant directivity horn, right, which is found in most classic, loudspeakers. Also,
I don't keep one of those laying around. They're too common.
Well, yeah, they're unfortunately far too common because Electro Voice's patent when we invented the constant directivity horn has now expired, and the entire industry can use them. So
you guys designed it, and now everybody uses it, and your patent's expired, and you don't even get paid for it.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
This one here, which we now see assembled, this comes out of a line array box, and what you would typically see is two of these stacked because that box is designed for extremely high output. So, what this does, you can see, like Mike said, is we have two, high frequency devices that would mount on the back, big suckers too. But then what we have when we stack those and when we put a complete array of boxes together is you have basically all of these boxes working together as one continuous device to, provide this, planar wave, as he said, or this, wall of sound might be patented too, but maybe that one expired also. I don't know. Anyway, that we have this consistent, coverage. So I just wanted to show what a waveguide was in principle, but now you could talk about how you guys have taken a waveguide like is used in concert touring systems and adapted that to portable systems like the Evolve, because to my knowledge, you certainly were the first that I know of, and I think you're still the only manufacturer that's using waveguides on their column speakers.
Yeah, and that's part of why.
Did you patent that too? Did you lock everybody out on that deal too?
I don't know. I'll have to check with our engineering team. I'm not sure if that was patented.
If you design it, you should.
I hope they did.
Yeah,
I hope they did.
I know, right?
But I don't know. I mean, they file so many patents, I can't keep up with it anymore. But I think the real benefit there, when you look at the Evolve systems versus some of the competitor systems, is exactly that waveguide, right? We're doing some things to get those drivers to sum together the right way as they should be, where most others will just have them all in a line with no waveguide, not really achieving proper summation, or they may try to even offset those drivers, one pointing 20 degrees to the left and then the next one pointing 20 degrees to the right in this zigzag kind of pattern. Again, one way of achieving wider coverage, but sacrificing something in the vertical plane, or there's a variety of drawbacks to doing it that way. It's certainly cheaper to produce, and something that many users don't ever look into or look behind the grill to really see what's happening back there. They just see the cosmetic stick sort of thing and assume they're all the same, but really what's underneath makes a big difference.
Like my mom says, it's what's inside that counts. So
yeah, and I don't know that we necessarily really answered the question either.
No, you haven't yet. So I'm going to come back to it. We dealt with the waveguide concept. Now, does the waveguide, especially on the Evolve?
Here you can see what the Evolve looks like as opposed to another column. And hopefully, I'm not giving away the trade secrets here, Mike. But you can see all these waveguides inside And you can also see that kind of asymmetrical J curve.
Yeah, exactly. No, and this was designed, we shared these photos for a reason, right? To try to tell.
Good.
that
So I'm not in
story.
trouble. Okay.
No, not this time.
I was gonna do it anyway. I just wondered if I was in trouble or not.
Yeah, exactly.
Here's why I'm not scared. You're quarantined. You can't come get me. So
Right. Yeah, but I can stop shipments. So.
So people who are watching this years in the future, there was this thing in 2020 called the quarantine, where
People stayed home.
it turns out the reason I have not written a book is not time. I thought it was because I didn't have time. Turns out that's not true. Also,
because writing sucks.
What's that?
Because writing sucks.
I think I can say the same thing about cleaning the house. I thought I would clean the house if I had time, but it turns out that is also not true. And I think it's because I don't do things that suck. So, yeah.
So there, ladies and gentlemen, is a lesson from tonight's show.
I won't touch that one.
Okay, so Waveguide, does that make a cabinet then? It has a different.
I was trying to think why we don't invite you on the show more often, Mike. I just remembered.
I got you, buddy. I got you.
So Waveguide.
Yeah. Back to you, Mike.
Yeah.
Sounds like
So
here's your shot at redemption.
I'm gonna get such a nasty email from Rebecca tomorrow. You let those guys say what? Sorry. I tried. I really did. So does Waveguide especially in the Evolve world, does that make it so that we have that wider dispersion, but not as much throw then maybe as our horned loaded cabinets? Or how does that fit into that kind of equation of a shorter compared to a longer throw?
Yeah, I mean, generally speaking, higher frequencies will travel in a more narrow way and travel, you can focus them a little bit more. So really when I think people are talking about a long throw versus a short throw cabinet, there's a couple of different factors there. Number one, how loud does the speaker get, right? Because the louder it gets, the further it will throw. But then there's also what is the coverage pattern of that speaker, and that could apply to either something with a waveguide like an array, or a typical constant directivity horn, right? Generally, the narrower, the further it will throw, and the wider in either plane, either vertically or horizontally, right? The Evolve system, for instance, is 120 degrees wide, 40 degrees vertical, right? Where many of our point source boxes.
I'm the graphics department now.
Yeah,
Mike.
You're doing well.
Yeah, very good. Very good. Many of our point source boxes are like 90 by 50 or something to that effect. But again, getting the right box is more about the coverage. I would say is generally how you want to think about it than throw. If you're dealing with throw at that point, you're probably covering some serious distance, and you really need either a much bigger PA or B, start thinking about delays to throw that far. You want to think in terms of coverage of your audience rather from left to right rather than deep. I think is generally
something to add to that. If I could, is we have to think about inverse square law, which tells us on a point source loudspeaker, when we double the distance, we lose 6 dB. So obviously we lose more in the first part of the distance than we do in the last part, and that's just physics. Now, people often want to talk about the column arrays, which, as we discussed, the Evolve is a column array, and it does have some line array technology. They're kind of cousins. Column arrays and line arrays are sort of cousins. And so people will often reference that line arrays only lose 3 dB when they double distance, but it's very, very important to note that that is only down to a certain frequency, and the length of the array dictates that frequency. And there is some dizzying math. And John, I think you and I did a show like 4 years ago, still just as valid today. If you find yourself with a little extra time on your hands, give it a watch. The point being, though, what Mike said absolutely reigns true. Whether we're talking about column arrays, we're talking about point source, fundamentally it's the same. Call it, for all intents and purposes, around math, 6 dB every time you double the distance. So if you're worried about long throws, delays are going to be the simplest and easiest way to accomplish that.
For sure. Yeah, I think when you start talking about array length and what frequencies you're controlling, that's it really is mind-boggling how tough it is. You could have a line array like Ben's system that's probably are you doing 12, 16 boxes a side now, something like that? So, these
Depends on the
arrays
show, obviously,
are
but yeah,
something like, maybe 20 feet in length. And you're controlling probably down to about 200 hertz, 300 hertz, maybe.
Yeah, in that ballpark when you get into that 16 box range, and a couple other things. Not only is the array long and heavy, which requires height and the ability to lift it, but there's also some math involved. And you guys have made a great software package that we use, but it's not just a matter of hanging 16 boxes in a row. Each of these boxes is adjusted with its angle relative to the other boxes, and also its attenuation. So there's some things that are going on here besides just the length of the array. I guess the moral of the story, line arrays are great. Again, watch the show if you want to jump in, but that's not really something you put your toe in. I mean, either you get wet and go swimming or you don't. And the simple thing here for most venues is going to be and again, people will use line array boxes, 2 or 3 on a stick. It doesn't really make a line array. And that's okay. You just have sort of a directionalized point source array, but it doesn't change the physics. A delay is probably still the best way to reach the back of the room.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think there's a lot of misconception out there. When you're using maybe a line array type cabinet and doing 2 or 3 of them on a stick, there's really little benefit whatsoever other than maybe cosmetics because you think it looks cool. But acoustically, I would say probably 90% of the time you're better off with a point source box. And we see this all the time, not only with DJs, but even churches, they get, or installs of any kind, they get hung up on, we got to have a line array, got to have a line array. So often it's the wrong thing for the room.
Yeah. Interesting. I guess I wouldn't even thought of it.
And sometimes it's the right thing, but that brings us to the punchline, which is it depends.
Mm-hmm.
So that actually bridges us kind of into the next question. I'm kind of skipping a little bit here. Somebody had asked about having better coverage over a crowd. Should they get higher powered speakers to cover the crowd better, or would they be better with more boxes to cover a larger crowd?
I would say one of the words they used is correct, but not in the context they used it. I would say they should get the boxes higher. It's not a question of power. We've done a lot of shows on how power correlates to loudness. They're also worth a great watch. Frankly, I think John needs the YouTube views, so you could just help him out and go watch them. But I'm just happy you're, listening to me for 5 minutes. I don't know, but no, I mean, higher power, you still have the same issue of 6 dB loss per distance. So you're just going to make it louder in the front for those people, and you're still going to have that same fundamental loss, 6 dB, because that's not a linear measurement. It's a ratio basically. And so as opposed to more speakers, well, now that brings us to the delays we were talking about. Mm-hmm. If the idea is I'm going to put a bunch of speakers in the front and that's going to help, that idea is wrong.
Right.
You can create some serious problems with overlapping horns and creating power alleys and nulls and, all kinds of.
And frankly, you're not even really gaining that much power. I mean, one of my favorite ways when I first started at EV, and started learning about all of these audio things, one of the things that has stuck to me since day one has been the concept of doubling your gear, essentially, and all you're really walking away with is 3 decibels in gain, right? So, and they put it in terms like this. You imagine Metallica's coming to town and they've got this monstrous rig, right? Monstrous. Fills up the whole dang stadium. They could double that entire system. And so instead of 200 boxes, they go to 400 boxes, right? 12 more semi-loads. They would gain 3 decibels.
It is a fact.
3 decibels is all they would gain. So when you think about that in that kind of scale, it becomes, diminishing returns. If you're going from 1 to 2 maybe. But by the time you get to 2 to 4 or 4 to 8 or anything like this, your gains are minimal at that point. You know?
One thing I would say that it's not an exception because the physics is sound and the physics is fact. So don't use the word exception with this, but one thing I would say that I tend to, I guess I can't think of a way to say it other than just to say it. Subwoofers. More is better. It's not about dBs as much as air, I think.
Right.
And people will look at the amount of subs that I'll bring to a show. And now it depends on the show. If you're doing, Metallica, you can't have enough subs. Just keep bringing them, But, when I do maybe some of these older country acts or something, and people say, wow, is it really necessary to bring, double 18s for a 1,000-seat casino for that guy? I say, you know what? It's going to sound so smooth because I am just not working those boxes,
Right.
So that is, I think subwoofers is sort of you have to kind of put an asterisk behind those. But again, the physics is sound. I only gain 3 dB of loudness.
Right.
And when it comes to top boxes where, summation and overlap is potentially a bad thing, almost always a bad thing, more really isn't better. So I would say, as I've said before, have the right rig for the gig. As Mike said a few minutes ago, have the right coverage for the room, whether that's, horizontal or whatever. And if you need to go further, John, you've led us down a good trail here. This all kind of ties together.
I know, we're doing well. You'd think I'd have somebody had a plan when they put this together. I don't know.
It must have been you because I promise.
I think Ben submitted all the questions. I don't know.
Me and Mike have never had a plan. That's anyway, plan to dominate the world maybe. But anyway, having something like delays and that sort of thing. But as I said in the beginning, there is an advantage if you need to cover a room, getting the loudspeaker up in the air. Because we can begin to tilt that down a little bit and use the horn's coverage, assuming it has a CD like Mike talked about, constant directivity horn, advantageously. So,
excellent.
But higher power isn't necessarily the answer.
But the higher, higher could be the answer.
Maybe. It depends.
Okay, let's continue. Let's continue on. The next one, the question was somebody had asked about they have a buzz in their system, and where would be the first spot to look if you have a buzz in your sound system? So Mike, where would be we're setting up a PA, you've got a buzz in it. Where would be the first spot you would look? Not continue down a trail of where you'd look. Where's the first spot that would be like, okay, this is probably where it's coming from, so let's try this first.
I mean, I suppose my gut would be the power source, meaning AC power. I think is probably the most common. There could be some other things that are occurring, but generally speaking, that's the variable in your system, right? You probably have all your gear racked up, and you probably set it up essentially the same way from venue to venue. So typically, I would say it's your electrical source that's going to be the issue there. Now, what can you do about it? That's where things get hairy when
that's when we turn to Ben.
When this is your outlet, pal, take it or leave it, right? Then you've got some limited options there, but generally that's where I would start and see if you can troubleshoot that somehow.
So Ben, I kind of figured this is where Mike would go. And I knew this would be a good setup for you. So
I don't disagree with him. I think I'm going to add to it. I'm going to say a couple different things because I'll start with power as well. One of the reasons that power is a culprit is often our mixing board or our controller is connected to one power outlet and our loudspeaker is connected to another. We take advantage of the outlet close to the loudspeaker, and they may have different ground potentials between the two. So for me, I don't know that I would say there's one single first thing I look at. I would say that I take in a series of information first. And a couple of the quick things I'll look at is, do I have the buzz in both loudspeakers or just one? If it's just one, okay, I can begin to, say it's there. Or if I have it in both loudspeakers, do I have it in my headphones? Is it in the signal itself? And if it is, then I at least know which power source maybe to look at, or there's a myriad of other problems that you can go look for. I want to be glib when you say, where do you go to look for the buzz and say, well, where it is, of course, but that's, but it could be in a number of different places. But as Mike said, if your system is typically racked together, it's probably not an interconnect that has gone bad within the rack. It probably is something external to the rack, and it could be a damaged cable or a missing pin on a cable or something like that. But I agree. I think power is the first place where I'd go, well, what happens if I plug that speaker into the same outlet as my mixing board is, whether that just takes an extension cord, and you can do that really quick and dirty just to see if the problem goes away. And if it does, well, then stop looking because you found it.
Mm-hmm.
And then run your cord neatly.
Right.
So if we have a situation now, obviously the extension cord is there. I was actually expecting you to get into, sometimes there's this thing called dirty power. You've talked about that in the past, where some outlets just are not as clean and such. Extension cord will help the one situation, but when you get into some situations, is there any way to deal with that?
Well, here again, people get really frustrated when it comes to interfaces and transformer-based devices. Jensen makes some great ones, radial, that sort of thing. And I say, well, which one do I get? And I say, what kind of buzz do you have? There isn't necessarily one that fits every solution, because there's, it can occur on the input side, it can occur on the output side. I've seen, where people will connect video cables to a system, VGA, and even HDMI still, and suddenly now there's a buzz, because, and what we're talking about in this instance is a ground loop. And, basically wherever that loop is created, that's where we got to eliminate it. So rather than talking about this, because it's not only would take us the remainder of the time we have today, but it could take us hours. And frankly, guys like Neil Muncy, and Bill Whitlock have made careers out of this. I mean, another thing you can do if you're bored at home is go read some of Neil and Bill's stuff. It's very detailed.
No one's going to do that ever. No one's ever going to do that.
I'll tell you what, you're gonna be thankful to come back to my videos. That's all I'm gonna say. But and I love these guys. Bill, I admire Bill. He's a very intelligent guy. But like I said, it's very detailed and it's very deep. So a couple things I would say about that. One is you can have a device. We've talked about them in the past, like a radial ice cube or something. And if you plug it in and the buzz goes away, stop. Problem solved. The other thing I'm going to say is do not ever, never, never, ever lift the equipment safety ground, which is the third round prong on your plug-in. Don't do that. I've got one here. It's this thing. Don't ever break that off. Don't use a cheater plug to defeat it. That thing exists for one purpose and one purpose only, and it's to keep you and your guests alive. So while that may solve the problem, it creates a potentially far bigger problem. You no longer have a buzz, but you had a buzz because there was current flowing on that thing to begin with. So now you have a much bigger potential problem.
It's going to go somewhere.
Yeah, and it could be you.
It could be you.
And that would be the merciful thing. The unfortunate thing would be if it went into somebody else. So bottom line, don't do that. Solve it on the signal side, whether it's input or output. Yes, it can be frustrating. Yes, it can be dry, but it is safe to do it that way. And if it's a noisy outlet, that's rare. There certainly is RF noise. It usually doesn't manifest itself audibly. It usually manifests itself in different ways, causes problems with the way our equipment operates, causes them to do weird things, that sort of thing. But if you have audible equipment noise, then use a good power conditioner, something that will eliminate that noise. And you know what? We've done a couple shows on that. So
we have. Excellent.
Our friends at Furman do a fine job.
They do.
People have mentioned that.
All Furmans are not created equal. So watch the show and be aware of what you're getting. Or I got a little time in my hands, shoot me a message.
And he can walk you through and tell you the right one. All right, gentlemen, let's continue. We got a little bit of time left here. So this is one that I see. I get people who are messaging me quite often, and they're asking, okay, I've got a pair of this speakers, and I want to buy a sub to go with it. And invariably, my recommendation is usually to stay in the same family of tops to bottoms. But it's like, I must be the only person in the world who believes that when it comes to the DJ world. They're like, oh, can I get the ETX sub and put my ZLX speakers over the top of that? What's the pros and cons of mixing and matching families like that? And then we'll even go beyond that and mixing and matching sub sizes.
Sure.
Take it, Mike.
If we're talking about mixing and matching brands is one thing. It's always okay to add an Electro Voice loudspeaker to any other manufacturer. It is never okay to add any other manufacturer to an Electro Voice rig. I don't know what else to say.
There was no. It depends in that one. I noticed that.
That might be a little bit oversimplified, and there might be a little bit full of it at that point. But generally speaking, as far as our stuff is concerned, our individual families are always able to work together in some ways. Now, when looking at a system, you're looking at maybe a couple of different things. Price is a factor in those decisions, but how that system is going to perform is also part of your thinking. So, if we take the middle of the road family or something like that, something like EKX, for example, you kind of need to think about what your plans are for the future there. If you're planning on buying a set of EKX tops and well, maybe I'll add some subs later because I really want the ETX ones, but I can't afford those right now. If you need the output of the ETX subs to go with the EKX tops, that's perfectly fine. But if you think the EKX subs are good enough, then I would roll with that. You'll see the preset boxes oftentimes within reason are made to work with one another. I think within one or two families, but generally speaking, you see presets for a really big jump between them. I don't think you'll see a preset for a ZLX top in an ETX subwoofer.
Correct, yeah.
For example, but you would see some interconnectivity possibilities, I think, with ELX 200, for instance, and ZLX, and so on and so forth. Again, not that it prevents you from mixing and matching any of the families. You certainly can do that. Generally speaking, subwoofers are asked to do more than they should. So honestly, from a balance standpoint, if you're putting together, if you had a pair of, ELX 200 tops and you really like that low end, there's nothing wrong with going with ETX subs with ELX 200 tops at that point. You can use some of the generic crossovers like 100 hertz or things like that to still be able to make that work. And then what you have is maybe a ratio where your subs aren't necessarily the first thing to run out of gas. If you're doing a typical 2 tops, 2 subs on poles, 99% of the time it's your subwoofer that's going to run out of gas first.
Sure.
Right. But that's generally, designed within the family to hit a price point so that it matches as a system cosmetically, the build materials, the things like that all match up. But the performance, sometimes it does make sense to go up, 1 or 2 levels when it comes to subwoofers and pare that down if you're only using a pair of tops. So, be some variation there. And I think it's okay to mix and match. If it sounds good, do it. I'll just put it that way.
So let's talk about mixing and matching now specific subwoofers from 2 different lines. Say if we have an ETX sub and we wanted to have more bass, but we don't have ETX, could you put an EKX in there, or are they going to end up fighting and causing more issues?
Again, could you? Yes, you would probably achieve more output, but you could be creating some issues because the way each of those loudspeakers performs varies, right? So you could, there's too many variables to get into what would go wrong.
Right, sure.
That depends on placement, it depends on your program material, it depends on where they are in relation to each other, blah, 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 blah. But you would generally get more output, but you could cause some other issues along the way there. So generally speaking, I would stick, with one type of subwoofer. The same way you would stick with, preferably one type of full range speaker as well, right? They're voiced differently, they sound differently. So having it sound one way here and different right here is generally not a good thing.
So final question along this line. if we go down into the ELX 200 series, we have a 12-inch and an 18-inch sub, and I have had people asking about that they have they have that little system with the two subs, the two 12-inch and the 10-inch tops, and they're wanting to have extra bass and want to throw an 18-inch sub in that configuration.
Mm-hmm.
What's your thoughts of that?
I would maybe just bring the 18-inch sub and leave the 12-inch sub at home at that point.
Okay.
You know, so
That's what
and I said all the right things because Ben. Yeah.
That's what I was going to say.
I passed the Ben test tonight.
You did really, really well. Excellent. Okay. Again, that particular question was one that has come to me on numerous occasions. Now I have some information to share with them besides saying that they just need to buy matching all the way, because that's always been my default, is just to say, buy the same series.
Yeah, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I think stepping up when it comes to subwoofers, I think it's okay to step up a little bit, give yourself a little extra low end, because that's generally the weak point in your system.
Yeah, I'd never go backwards. I'd never step down on the subwoofer if you can help it. You know, because like Mike said, that's the first thing that's going to run out of gas, and so those tops are going to outrun it. An EKX top is going to outrun the ELX 218 sub. And so on and so forth. So doesn't mean that you can't, but just be aware of those things, I think. So
a question not in our list here, guys. This is one Ben, you talked about, of course, when you have all these dual 18 subs out there.
We had a list?
I had a list of questions I wanted to ask.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
So some people have talked about, so you always have to, with subwoofers, you have to have, in essence, two at a time, or I should say two per side, or you have to double them each time. So if I have one sub on each side, and then I would go to like a dual 18, and then I have to go to a quad 18 on each side. Is that accurate, or can I go to three 18-inch subwoofers on each side as I'm buying? Will I notice a difference if I go from 2 to 3?
Of course you will.
Okay.
You're still adding. It maybe isn't the math isn't quite as clean where we're working in multiples of 3 dB at that point, but of course you can always add an odd number of subwoofers. There's no rule that says you have to have an even number of them.
Okay.
You can have 3 subs total if you want. So absolutely.
Sure.
Excellent. Okay, so the last question, we're going to hit this one a little bit. Somebody had asked about top speaker cabinets. Of course, they're in the ELX 200 series, and even some of the others. There's multiple 12-inch, or there's a 10-inch, 12-inch, and a 15-inch cabinet. Mm-hmm. Is there kind of a rule of thumb that you guys would have where one would work? Because most of them, they're looking for less weight. Is there some type of music that if a DJ played on a regular basis, that the 12-inch would be fine, or is it something that they should always go to the bigger box unless they're using subs? How can we kind of help guide them with that when you've got DJs who don't want that weight of having to carry a sub and a 15?
Well, I like the voicing of a 12 over a sub personally. So I think if you're carrying a sub, maybe you don't need the 15. But I'm anxious to hear Mike's answer on this. To me, I don't know that it has so much to do with the type of music as it does the room and the event. But obviously, you can get by with less in a smaller room. But I'm going to hear Mike's answer to this.
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree. While I personally prefer the sound of a 12-inch with a sub, there is that school of thought. I think maybe not as relevant as it used to be, where systems were run full range all the time. When you looked at passive systems back in the day, for instance, it maybe your sub had a low pass filter on it, which would mean at 100 hertz and below, it would play all of that. But your tops, for instance, might play everything, right, including below 100 hertz. So when you were running systems like that, there was a thought, if you wanted a little extra low end out of your system, maybe if you're a DJ playing a lot of hip hop, you want that low end to really be accentuated. I think that's where maybe 15-inch tops with subs played a larger role at that point. If you wanted, some low end, where if you wanted a more natural kind of flat live sound response, maybe a 12-inch top with your sub would be a little more balanced throughout the frequency range. But now with powered boxes, and really as long as you're using the crossover functions, and in the DSP that's built into all of our speakers,
Which you should be.
which you absolutely should be. If you're not, then we need to have a little chat, and then I promise you that 30 seconds of your life will be well worth it. Use those functions, use those crossovers, because that prevents the loudspeaker. It doesn't make a lot of sense if I'm going to buy a 15-inch top so it can play down to 50 hertz when the 12-inch top plays down to 60 hertz. But then I set the crossover at 100 hertz. And neither one plays that low. Doesn't do you a lot of good. Now, if you want the flexibility of getting that low end and be able to have those events where I'm going to leave my subwoofer at home, and in those instances, I want my tops to be able to play a little more low end, then I would tend to lean towards a 15. But that kind of really only plays a role for me. The trade-off in that lower frequency response only is a factor if you think you're going to be using your system without subwoofers. If that's an option, then consider that, and consider whether or not it's worth having that extra expense and weight and size with you always. And if it is, great. If not, then I would tend to go towards the smaller box. Now, just one other thing is that there generally is the larger boxes generally are louder across the frequency range, but it's also factoring in that low end is really where that's happening. So you may see on the spec sheet that the overall max SPL out of a 15-inch is 1 decibel, maybe 2 decibels louder than its 12-inch cousin, but it's really the low end that's bringing that up. So again, are you going to use that low end by itself, or are you relying on your sub to do that work?
Yeah. Interesting. I guess
and that's all I have to say about that.
Yeah, I haven't thought about it from that way there, Forrest. Thanks. Gentlemen,
am I right then? Did I?
No, that was good. That was
good.
I
think so. Well, we both agreed we like the voicing of a 12 over a sub, but yeah, like you said, there's not a hard and fast answer either, and there really is a lot of subjectivity. And I've said it many times. And in this case, we got to try it with 2. But I think if you put 10 sound guys in here, you'd have 11 opinions. So,
and in some ways, honestly, I really even enjoy the sound sometimes of an even smaller system. I really like the sound of the 10-inch ETX with a 15.
Oh, yeah.
It's just tighter and punchier, and it's everything I need. I tend to not like low end that is so overwhelming and almost just floppy. I like that tighter punch more than I like the real deep stuff. But again, that's personal preference. But I think you're seeing that actually some shifts in the way music is recorded now too. I think it's really interesting the way stuff is being produced with lots of compression and lots of detail. Right? I think, I don't know if she deserves the credit for it, but certainly the most popularized, example of that I could tell you would be something like Billie Eilish. It sounds really intimate, right? Really close mic'd. I mean, when you play it back through a good system, she's right in your ear, and there's just this detail and this. The way it's produced is really, really interesting. We've used some of her stuff for demo tracks, and there's really some crazy production stuff going on in that stuff. And I've seen her style now starting to bleed into some other artists. So I find that interesting as well. And again, I prefer the sounds of that on a smaller system as well. Where it's a little tighter and it just sounds more defined to me.
Excellent. Gentlemen, our time is up.
Okay, then.
We need to wrap. Yeah.
Golly.
We've got to wrap things up. Thank you guys for
there's
being...
nothing left to do but go eat ice cream.
Yeah, it's ice cream time now. But okay, so I'm sorry.
What's your favorite flavor, man?
Yeah, I was going to ask the question, but
that's like picking a favorite child. I don't really have one. I'm all over.
Really?
Oh yeah, I like them all.
Yeah, he likes the ones that are dribbling.
I don't like them all. I don't like a lot of the chocolates actually, but I like pretty much anything else. But some days I want the salty, caramely, pecan-y. Some days I want the fruity, it just depends. So, I've done some wacky combinations. Like, what was the last thing I had? I was in St. Augustine, gosh, it seems like an eternity ago, but it was like 3 weeks ago. And I think I had rum raisin and key lime pie or something together in a scoop. So, why not?
My problem is I love spumoni, but I can never get it anywhere. I can't find it. So when I do see it, I buy like a ton of it, and that's it.
Gentlemen, we got to run. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Mike, for being on. Thank you guys for being with us. Ben and Mike will be back. We're going to try to do this like about once a month if we can get it to work out and have Mike jump in with us. Next, I
got a chaperone now. Great.
Yeah, exactly. He wants to make sure we don't say the wrong things. I'm so excited when we get into some of those shows. When we're talking about making wires with toothpicks, it'll be great. It'll be fun.
I'll try to bring some sanity to this.
There we are.
You're gonna bring this. You're gonna bring the sanity to this.
Oh, boy.
Those who don't know, I don't know that I have a closer friend in the industry than Mike. So we are enjoying the banter here, I think.
You're my boy, Blue.
All right. We'll be back in about, we're about 4 or 5 minutes away with Brian and Jay, and we'll be talking about, are we going to be doing free gigs pretty soon? We'll be right back.